You're listening to Mr. Liverpool himself, Frank Carlyle, exclusively on Mersey Radio.
Wasn't that absolutely fantastic? As I said, why she never made it big is beyond me. It really is beyond me. But anyway, that was Beryl Marsden, and I'm going. No, it's not. I'm going to know. It's what she got. What she's got. No, what she got. What she got. That's it. Yeah. What she got. What she got. It's a funny title, isn't it? It's like a rap song, isn't it?
That's this guy. I like that one.
No, well, I'm just saying, isn't it? Like the title, what she got.
What she got. Yeah.
Like, or we'd have said what she's got. That's like a rap thing, isn't it? What she got. Oh, never mind. Anyway, it's me just going around in circles. What we'll be talking about a bit later on as well is Anthony Brown. Not talking about it, but Anthony Brown, we've got to congratulate him because it's just been announced that he's going to do a massive gateway artwork when you're coming off at Lime Street. And I'm really looking forward to seeing this. And we'll have Anthony on, won't we?
Yeah,
we'll have Anthony on. Yeah. And we'll be talking more about it in depth. But anyway, from me, Frank Carlyle, and Jason Pennington, the producer, and Mersey Radio, all Mersey Radio, and everyone out there, it's a big congratulations to the wonderful artist, Anthony Brown, who's a good friend of us, by the way, friend of mine, personal friend of mine. He's a friend of Jason's, he's a friend of the station, he's a friend of everybody. Everybody who comes in contact with Anthony Brown loves his work and just loves him as a person. Him and Lainey, his lovely, lovely wife, and all his brood, lovely people, just a lovely, lovely people. You always want something good, don't you, in life, and especially, you want something good for your own offspring, and yet this fella, you just look at him, you look at Lainey, you look at his kids, and you just say, what a lovely family, and it's like that. You couldn't even write it, you couldn't even put it in a script, because no one would believe it. That's what kind of a person Anthony Brown is, just a lovely, lovely man, and I'm very proud to say he's a good friend of mine as well. Anyway, we'll be talking to him in the next week or two about this wonderful project. And do you know what we've got on? I can't wait for this fella, because this fella knows about everything, and he's opened our eyes in the last couple of times he's been on, and I said, look, you've got to come on again and speak about these wonderful things, bands and singers and clubs and pubs and everything else. And it's Derek Shelmerdine, and you've got to get his book, because it tells you everything. Anyway, I'm just. Is he there? Yeah, he's there. Hello, Derek.
Hi, Frank. Yeah, I'm well here, mate.
Oh, brilliant! Absolutely wonderful. Listen, I was in the Jacaranda the other week, right. And could you tell me and the listeners a little bit more about it, and the great connection with the Beatles?
Yeah, the Jacaranda is one of the sort of classic clubs of the 60s. As you say, very heavy associations with the Beatles. And it was founded by Alan Williams, who was essentially the guy's first manager. It's debatable whether he was technically a manager, but he was the guy who got them their first gig in Hamburg. Yeah. And he opened the club in the late 50s. Yeah. And it had a very West Indian clientele, and students and beatniks. And I've heard it described as a bohemian in the past there. But the Beatles were, they would have been the Silver Beatles at that particular point. They knew Alan Williams, and one of the house bands around 1960, when the Beatles sort of played there, they first played there in the sort of summer of 1960. The house band was the Royal Caribbean Steel Band. So you can sort of see the background. Apparently they were going away, so Alan Williams invited them to play there. But apparently he said to them, before you can play, you need to do a bit of work for us. And John Lennon and Stuart Sutcliffe had just come out of art college, and they painted some famous murals on the various walls. I think they did one in the ladies' toilet. I'm not sure if that's still there. But when it was renovated, reopened a few years ago, they restored these particular murals.
Oh, models, yeah.
And they're still there now. It's also got another Beatles connection. John Lennon and Stuart Sutcliffe actually backed a beat poet called Royston Ellis. He was a sort of British Allen Ginsberg.
Oh, right, yeah.
And it was quite a popular thing at the time. Jimmy Page and some of the Shadows also backed Royston Ellis when he was giving poetry readings. And they were in a band with a couple of other guys. They called themselves the Dissenters. And that was famously around June of 1960.
I wonder if, you're mentioning the poets and I wonder if the likes of Roger McGough, I wonder if he knew this fella.
Oh, I would have thought so. I would have thought so very much. Because he's that sort of age. I mean, I think he was born around 1941, so he'd only been a few years older than someone like John Lennon. But in that sort of those sort of circles, he was quite a well-known character, and he apparently is one of the inspirations for the Beatles' paperback writer.
Really?
Yeah, and Polythene Pam as well.
Go on.
One of the albums. Well, there was some liaison or near liaison when they were all in Guernsey around 1963.
Wow.
So the Beatles have got a lot of influence. Alan Williams himself, I think, pulled out of the club around 1970.
Yeah.
But it was certainly one of the key bands, I think. It was a late-night drinking venue called Maxi San Susie at some point. I'm not sure exactly when that was. I think that might have been the 70s or the early 80s.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the venue itself has got quite a colourful history.
Well, to be honest, like, where the Jacaranda's are situated here in Liverpool, it's not far from the Crack, so there was just that little area, wasn't it, where the Beatles frequented?
Absolutely. I mean,
John Lennon in particular.
Yeah, they didn't play the Jacaranda an awful lot.
No.
I mean, that was one of the things about those particular times. I mean, the Cavern Club was what's always associated with the Beatles. But I think a lot of that and a lot of the fame of the Cavern Club is now retrospective because of the heights that the Beatles achieved. So their association with the Cavern, and they were the house band there basically. Well, I wouldn't go as far as say the house band maybe, but they played there 292 times, so they were pretty regular.
Well, the thing is as well, there's a place called Blair Hall, or it was a place called Blair Hall, which was up in Walton Road,
right?
And I know a couple of people who actually went to see the Beatles there. They weren't famous or anything like that, but they were just a band that appeared at this Blair Hall. It was a little dance hall, and they actually appeared there. And it's amazing, isn't it? Where the Beatles actually played. And it's only the Cavern that gets the distinction of the Beatles and everything else, and yet they played at the likes of the Jack, and the Jack is still there in its entirety. And as you said, some of the paintings or the models painted by the likes of the great Stuart Sutcliffe and Lennon himself, is still prevalent today.
Absolutely.
Just imagine, though, we've got Banksy, haven't we? We've got Banksy.
That's right.
And those morals there in the Jack, I wonder how much they'd be worth because it's Lennon.
Oh, they'd be worth an absolute fortune, wouldn't they? I mean, they're almost unique in that. Well, you can't be almost unique. They're very rare. I mean, there's not a lot of examples of stuff like that.
No, certainly not, because You know, we all, everybody, world-renowned Banksy, because there's a few things here in Liverpool that Banksy has done, and no one dares go near them, so to speak. You know, so Lennon, Stuart Sutcliffe. Funny enough, I gave a talk at this hotel, and it used to be Stuart Sutcliffe's family home, you know, as he was growing up, and that was in Sefton Park, and there was pictures up there as well.
Yeah, he famously financed his first bass guitar with a picture he sold. He was at an exhibition, and at the end of the exhibition, he sold one of his paintings. I think it was about 50 quid. Yeah. And that's what he used to finance his first guitar when he joined the Beatles.
Well, listen. You know, they said that. You know, I don't know whether it's a myth or what, but they said that Stuart Sutcliffe couldn't play an instrument. Is that true, or is that just a fallacy?
No, I don't think he was the best bass guitarist in the world. His heart, I don't think his heart was really in it, to be honest. He was very much more focused on his art, and one of the criticisms was that he would play, because he wasn't that effective as a bass guitarist. He'd often stand with his back to the audience, but I don't think he would have stayed long term with the Beatles. I think he would have gone back into the art world, because when he was in Hamburg, he was very much in with the arty set there. So I think the art was very fine. Art was very definitely his first love.
His forte, yeah, and his forte, would you say? Do you think though, if he would have lived, he would have been a fifth Beatle?
I don't think he'd have stayed on. I don't think he probably had the technical capabilities to have played bass guitar at that level. Probably because, you know, his heart wasn't in it. I mean, he might have done. He might have thought, well, you know, this is a lot of fun. But he'd effectively left the Beatles before. He never came back from Hamburg that first time, and the Beatles came back in sort of December 1960. He stayed there with his girlfriend Ingrid, and they had a stand-in bassist for I think it's about 4 gigs, and that's when Paul McCartney decided that he'd move to bass guitar. So technically, I mean, he was still part of the Beatles when Paul McCartney moved to bass. So I doubt long term he would have been part of the Beatles. He might well have been part of the I would say entourage, but he was a very big friend with John Lennon, so they'd have had a great friendship, and he probably encouraged John Lennon in Lennon's artwork as well, I would think.
Well, what you know, so you get conflicting stories and everything else. So not saying surrounding the death, but when he died, Stuart Sutcliffe at a ripe old age of 21 years of age, and he was a good-looking kid, wasn't he, at the time?
Oh, absolutely.
Now, the thing is, how did the likes of McCartney, Lennon and Harrison, you know, did it have any effect on them at all?
Oh, I think they were quite devastated when it happened. As you say, I mean, he was extremely young.
Yeah. And that's it.
Yeah.
That's it. It's so sad, isn't it, really? Paul Capper's just come in, you know, he's just arrived because Paul's a very special guest of mine. And would you like to ask him a question about the Jacaranda or the clubs or the pubs or anything, Paul?
Yeah, I mean, I've played the Jacaranda a few times myself, and I know people back in the day. I've got my wife Paula, her mum Kathleen, her cousin. So it goes like that, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I'm just establishing the line of the line again. But Diane, she used to say that she used to take. She worked in the Jacaranda, and she'd take the bacon butties up to the lads who were upstairs. You know. Everyone seems to have a story about the Beatles and the Jacaranda, but I mean, obviously we play in the pub and the club, the club isn't quite, and it's not quite the same as the old club. It's just the club we've got now. It's the Beatle legacy is just phenomenal, and it's overshadowed most of the music.
Yeah,
in Liverpool since, I think.
Well, that's a very good point. What do you think of that, Derek? You know what Paul's just said. You know, about people having different stories, and yet some of the stories and the places themselves, because Paul plays. He's a resident of the Cavern pub, and it's everything overshadows really. What Paul said about everything.
I think so. I think what we tend to forget nowadays is that we're talking back in the 60s. We're talking back in the very early days of, it's before technically rock was around. It's sort of just after rock and roll, and everything was new all of the time. And I mean, I'm a product of that era as well. And you had no idea whatsoever that you're actually living through history. I mean, if you take the other famous club, the Iron Door, I mean, there was quite what's the word? Not conflict between the Cavern and the friendly rivalry between the Cavern and the Iron Door. And apparently, if you played in one, they weren't. The other club wasn't keen for you to play in that one. But one of the bands that really gets associated with the Iron Door, of course, was the Searchers.
Well, I actually, sorry to interrupt there, because you excited me, because that was my club. I used to go there because I couldn't get in the Cavern for some reason. Maybe it was, maybe, I don't know what it was. Maybe they took one look at me and said, "You're not coming." I only ever went to Cavern once, but so I made me move towards the Iron Door, and I seen the likes of Dissenters. They were absolutely immense. Also, Rory Storm and the Hurricanes, the Mojos. And also the Undertakers, and they're the four bands that I actually went and seen and listened to. And they were immense.
Oh, they were great. I mean, the Searchers did their first residency when they came back from Hamburg in sort of late '62, and they did a live recording. The Searchers in sort of early '63, and I think they recorded about a dozen tracks, and that was what they gave to Pi. Records as their sort of demonstration, and Pi liked it. They said, "Oh yeah, well, come over here and we'll record you." And then, of course, "Sweets for My Sweet" came out in the June, and they did really well. And the Searchers did really well when they went across on the British invasion, 1964 to 1966. They were very successful over in America.
Well, listen, do you know your Love Potion number 9? You actually chose that. What made you, out of all the, the songs and everything else that they'd sung, and, the iconic songs, why pick that one, Love Potion number 9? What's the significance about that, or is there any significance?
Well, it's one of those songs that, at that particular time, the early 60s, all of these Mersey bands and bands down in London everywhere, the vast majority of what they were doing were covers of American songs, and you could pretty much guarantee, I mean, there were dozens and dozens of clubs around Liverpool at that particular time, and you could guarantee almost certainly that particular song was in the repertoire of just about every band that played, and there was a very, very strong probability that particular song you would hear at some point during the evening at just about any club, R&B type club, that you went to.
Oh, okay.
It's just such a fabulous song, really. It was a Clover's original.
Well, do you know this? Just before Paul asks you a couple of questions, "I'm Gonna Knock on Your Door" by the Pete Best Four. Is that a cover version from something else? Because I've heard that before, or just by him, and I've heard him singing. I didn't realise that it was the Pete Best Four.
Yeah, it was an Isley Brothers song.
The Isley Brothers.
And they do a great version.
Oh, yeah, well, that's it. That's what I've, because as I said, when we played it, I just couldn't believe that. It was just the Mersey sounds, wasn't it, by them?
Oh, very much.
I think Paul wants to ask you a question.
Yeah, I was just wondering whether you thought that the rise of the Beatles was absolutely inevitable, or whether there was something of a lottery about which one of the great bands that was parading their talents around Liverpool at the time might have come forward. I mean, I think history shows us that the Beatles sort of rose to the top through their own songwriting. I think that was the biggest thing about them. They wrote phenomenal songs, but I think at the time there was an earlier time when they were still experimenting with writing their own songs, and they were pretty much doing covers. I wonder if you think that the Beatles appear to be the standout band at the time.
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, at the time there were 3 or 4 bands that were always the sort of top bands in the Mersey beat polls, and the Beatles were always up there, but they probably weren't a lot better or a lot worse than the other half a dozen bands. People like Lee Curtis, the Undertakers, the Big Three. A lot of people thought the Big Three would be one of the first bands to break through. But I think you're right. I mean, what happened was that rock and roll in America had pretty much come to a dead end at the end of the 50s.
Yes.
And in America, it fragmented into different cul-de-sacs, really. Things like surf music, Phil Spector, dance crazes, which were all great, but they weren't really developing at all. But what happened in the UK when you got to the end of the 50s, instead of going off like that, British rock and roll morphed into beat music, your sort of classic combo, a couple of guitars, bass player and drums with a singer who either played guitar or stood in front. And I think then there were loads of great bands around that sort of 62, 64, 65. And then what happened, rock music started to really mature around 65, when the likes of Cream and Jimi Hendrix started to come to the fore. And the bands that were being, the bands that continued to be successful were the ones that were the songwriters, the Kinks, the Who, the Beatles, the Stones, and they achieved the next generation, as it were, quite rightly, as you say, because they were songwriters. I mean, they went to another level, I think, because their music's timeless. I mean, if you listen to their albums now, they don't sound as if they come necessarily from the late 60s. Whereas you listen to Stones albums from the time, and they sound as if they come from the late 60s.
Yeah, I think I was...
Brian Epstein, of course, they had a really good manager, and management's everything. I mean, you played Beryl Marston, and absolutely right. I mean, why she never went on to great fame, I'll never know. She was a fabulous singer.
So when I listen to some of the Beatles demos early on, they don't sound to be dramatically different to anybody else, And like Frank could tell you, I have listened to Lee Curtis. I mean, I know Lee. I sometimes go down to Latham Hall on a Thursday night, and Lee will still be there, and lots of the Undertakers. I mean, I'd listen to them, and they all sound like Mersey Beat had a sound, and the Beatles didn't appear to be phenomenally better. Most people I know used to think the Big Three were the best.
Yeah, well, even Lennon said that, didn't he?
Johnny Gus and all that,
Yeah.
Yeah, they were widely thought to be the ones that would, make the big time.
But it's strange, isn't it? How they never, you mentioned Beryl Marsden, and to me, I think it's a travesty. No slant towards Cilla Black, but I think it's a travesty that Beryl didn't become Beryl Marsden. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Absolutely. She should have been enormous. I mean, that one you played, I think, was about a 4th single, and it wasn't successful again. And she joined Shotgun Express with Mick Fleetwood and Rod Stewart, because Rod Stewart was unheard of at this particular time as well. It's sort of 65, 66. Well, it's be 66.
He was singing with Long John Baldry, I think, as well, wasn't he, at the time? And
that's right. I mean, he's like David Bowie. They both managed to go through the 60s singing with some amazing bands, but not really finding much fame until it came to the 1970s. And I think with Beryl Marsden, she just never, I don't know whether stuck at it long enough's the right thought, but she just didn't get the break. Because I think there's an element of luck in the whole rock and roll game.
Oh, very much so. Very much.
I think luck's got a lot to do with it. Derek, just before we finish, you mentioned about, you've mentioned, I think, would you come on in a couple of weeks again, if you don't mind?
Oh, I'd love to.
Okay, I'll tell you for why, and bear this in mind, please. I know that we haven't gone through the clubs and the pubs and everything else, I wanted to talk about the grapes and everything else, because the grapes is associated with the Beatles. And even Bill Clinton, by the way. Bill Clinton, when he was at Oxford, or just to say something, Bill Clinton, when he was at Oxford, he came up to the Cavern to see the Beatles because, they were the band, anyway, he'd never seen them. But he went in the grapes and had a few bevies. Did you know that?
No, I didn't actually.
Well, there you go. I've said something. At least I've said something that Derek didn't know anything about. But anyway, would you be willing to talk about some of the bands, like the Big Three, but other bands that are so obscure? You see some of the names. I've seen some of the names on the Cavern wall. The bricks, and I've never even heard of them. And yet they were local bands, because this fellow was standing there. I was waiting to go and see Paul Capper, to be honest.
Hey, my name's on the wall,
I know. There we go.
Obscure. Who is he?
But this fella turned around and I said, look at this lad here, and he went, well, they are Liverpool bands going back to the 60s. And yeah, I've never even heard of them. So could you conjure up some bands that, we might have heard of them, I don't know, and talk about them and what they were like? Like the Dissenters, there's a name.
Yeah.
The Dissenters, for example.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because I'll tell you for why I mentioned the Dissenters. I went to our school, we were all leaving school, right? And well, I was at college, to be honest, but all my mates were leaving school, and we had this little party, like a graduation party, and they're all leaving. And I went to the local, it was the gym in the school, and the Dissenters were the group they were on, and it's the first time I ever heard some other guy, man, was taking my love away from, and I was listening to these, and they were phenomenal to me. So could you talk about the likes of the Dissenters and other bands, please?
Yeah, absolutely. It'd be a pleasure.
Brilliant. Oh, Derek, we've run out of time, and I'm so sorry, that we have, because I could have had you on forever, to be honest. But, we've got a show to go on. So will you come on in a couple of weeks?
Oh, I'd love to. Oh,
brilliant. Thanks a lot. And don't forget, talk about these wonderful bands that never quite actually made it.
Oh, yeah, there were an awful lot of them. There were an awful lot of bands around in the early 60s.
Excellent.
It was the thing to do.
Excellent stuff. Thank you so much, John. Do you ever remember, I forget the name of them, but I will remember by the time I come up, and you will, what was it? I forget the band. It came to me and it went again. But you will know them, and I'll promise you now that I'll remember the band, and you'll talk about them for me, because I know that you'll know what I mean. Okay?
Okay, mate. Great to talk to you.
And you, Derek. Thank you so much. Bye-bye now.
Thanks, Derek.
Cheers, Frank.
That was the great Derek Shelmerdine, and, he knows... He
knows.
He does know. He knows, But anyway, that's Derek, and he'll be on in a couple of weeks, and we'll be talking about bands that actually never made it and should have made it. Okay, so listen, we're going to go for a little break, and what we're going to do, we're going to play Lady Bird by Capper, the Bad Wolf, and No Mercy by Butterfly in the Traffic, because right after that we've got Grant Niebergall on, and you know Grant, don't you?
I do know Grant. I'll tell you that track is a historical track, Lady Bird. It's about the summer of 1976.
Really?
Yeah, and it uses all local locations in Formby and Southport and Innswoods, all these places. It was about the record-breaking summer of 1976 when the temperature was 35.9 degrees.
Wow. And do you know what? I went from the March, because I always remember the boat race. And the boat race was in the March, and it was hot then down in London, obviously.
It was.
And then I went right through. Get onto this, got to tell you this. I went right through to August. And I always remember there was a documentary on about a fair, you know, like a circus sort of thing. And they brought that, do you ever remember, what's his name? Do you ever remember that programme, June and Terry? And this fella, Terry, he was in a couple of carry-ons. He got on my nerves, to be honest. He was, what was his name? Terry something.
Oh, Terry. Was it June Whitfield and Terry?
June Whitfield and Terry. And you know what I mean?
I know exactly who you mean, but I can't remember his surname suddenly.
Well, get on to this. This is absolutely true, this. This documentary was on, and they were talking to this fella who owned this circus type thing, and they got that Terry fella down, right? And anyway, he came, and he you know, as a celebrity, and the fella kicked off on him because he went over to these, like, shall we say, indigenous natives of America, or India. I'm not quite so sure now. And he asked them to do a rain dance, right? And all of a sudden, they did a rain dance, and it started to lash down. And he was blaming Terry Scott. He was blaming Terry Scott. And he said, the fat bee, the this and that and everything else. He said, and he's getting 500 quid off me. He said, and I'm not going to give him it. It'll be fantastic to show that documentary again because it was so funny. It's all of a sudden it rained from a crack of nut day. Enough of that. So you shouldn't have said nothing, Paul.
I shouldn't have.
Anyway, Lazy Bird by Cavern and the Bad Wolf, followed by No Mercy by Butterfly in the Traffic, followed by our wonderful guest, special guest, monthly guest, Grant Niebergall. And here we have Lazy Bird by Kappa and the Bad Wolf.
The best in 60s and 70s music, plus a little bit of history. Tune into Frank Carlyle every Monday at 8 p.m. here only on Mersey Radio.